Hello everyone, DM Gashbad here, and today we have my first ever two-player battle report for the Doctor Who Exterminate miniatures game. And we're going to start out simple. We're going to start out with Scenario 1 from the Exterminate Guide to the Time Vortex book, A Meeting of Metal. This is going to be a pretty straightforward clash between Cybermen and Daleks. We're only going to be using 3 recruitment cards each, and because my opponent for this game is my 8-year-old son, we're also going to pare down some of the regular rules. I'll get to that in a minute, but first I want to go over some of the rules changes that I'll be incorporating for this game that I wasn't using in my first solo games that you may have seen a while back. In those solo games, I played the game straight out of the box. I wasn't using the FAQ because it was a little confusing to me, but this time I am going to use it. Primarily, the changes that the FAQ/Errata make are to shocked characters. So now when a character is shocked, it can't move, it can't fight in melee, it can't shoot. It's just laid on its side and it's really hurt until it recovers. The other thing I'm doing differently is underfire tokens. In the previous game, if you had one underfire token, then you couldn't move. In this game, it's if you have one underfire token, then you can't shoot. Both are technically correct. The rulebook has it both ways. It prints the rule 2 different ways in 2 different spots. So I didn't exactly play it wrong, but the errata document makes it clear that what you're supposed to do is when you get 1 underfire token, you can't shoot, and when you have 2 underfire tokens, you can neither move nor shoot. So with that out of the way, let's look briefly at the forces that we'll be using and talk about the models as well, because that's fun. I will be using the Cybermen in this game because my son wanted to use the Daleks, which is only fair. For my 3 recruitment cards, I took 2 cards worth of Cybermen, 4 Cybermen each for a total of 8. Then I took a Cybermen and Cybermats card, so that's 2 Cybermen and 4 Cybermats. My thinking with this was that I thought it would be less difficult for my son to fight the Cybermats. Daleks get victory points for every model they exterminate, and giving a bunch of little guys that he can blast, first off, should be pretty entertaining, second off, should give him a fair amount of victory points. So my intention was to take it easy on him, but I think actually these Cybermats are really important for Cybermen force. If it was just a bunch of Cybermen slowly stomping forward, I'm not sure that they would do as well, but having a couple fast-moving elements I think is really helpful, so I think it was a good choice. I also took a Cyber Leader to round out the force. So this is a metal Cyberman from the Nightmare in Silver box from Warlord Games. I painted the handles on his head black to make him look like Cyber Leader 1 from the Doomsday episode, because that's one where they specifically refer to one of the Cybermen as Cyber Leader. So you can see him in the middle there. He looks very similar, but I can tell them apart. Cyber Leader is kind of cool. He has some stat upgrades from a normal Cyberman, but if he gets exterminated, he can just upload his consciousness into another Cyberman nearby, so he's kind of immortal so long as there are more Cybermen around him. Also, when you take him, you get a Cybermat swarm for free, so there we have 2 bases of Cybermats to follow him around. There's not really a whole lot new to say about the Cybermen. They paint up really nice. The metal one is fine. The Cybermats are cool. They are, I will say, probably the smallest individual model I've ever had to paint. They are really tiny, and for me, moving them around the table with my big farmer hands, sometimes it is a challenge, but really no complaints with these guys. Let's go on to the Daleks. Real straightforward, 2 Dalek patrols of 3 Daleks each plus a patrol leader. Warlord Games paints their patrol leaders as all black like Dalek Sec, so I just copied that. Normally in the show, patrol leaders, minor Dalek leaders, they look just like the other Daleks. You do see random black Daleks wandering around in the episode Sorcerer's Apprentice, I think. In the old series, you would have Daleks of different colors denoting leaders, but these are clearly not the old series Daleks. The models are the new series ones. So I just went with all black, and while we're talking about the Dalek models themselves, you may have heard me talk about how nice the Cybermen models were in the video before and how quickly they painted and all that kind of thing. These Daleks are not as easy. You would think, what's the big deal? You just paint them all brass and then just dry brush them and you're done, but that's not really the case. The Time War Daleks are a combination of brass and gold with some tiny little detail bits of black here and there. So I tried to paint them as accurately as I could, and it actually was kind of a pain. They took me a long time. Also, the models themselves fit together in this very strange 3-part system. They kind of all come together in 3 parts. It required some green stuff to fill in the gaps. They made some odd lines here and there that were very difficult to get rid of. And there were some mold lines running down really inconvenient places like the bumps on the back of the Daleks. I don't necessarily blame Warlord Games for this. They are very nice models, and they're just weird shapes to have to deal with. There probably isn't a really simple engineering solution to get all the details on these guys and have them fit together really nicely and avoid mold lines and gaps and all that stuff. So it's not really that big of a criticism. I'm just letting you know they are more difficult to paint than the Cybermen. And unlike the last game, when we're setting up our force for this game, we are going to use more of the full rules. We are going to use both battle cards and adventure cards. Adventure cards are special cards that you choose beforehand that give you advantages during the game. There's a million of them, and I didn't really want to take the time to choose them for the forces. I didn't think it was fair that my son would have to learn like 50 cards and then make a decision. So first off, you're supposed to have 5. I reduced that to 3. I think that's fine. This is going to be a small game. And we drew them randomly. I just took a pile of the generic ones and we just took the top 3 each. So I ended up with my Cybermen force. I ended up with Escape Plan, Rapid Response, and Finish Them. All of them are useful cards. None of them are bad, but I don't think any of them are particularly game-breaking. We're also going to be using battle cards. Battle cards you refresh throughout the game, and you use them mostly to modify dice rolls. Instead of a hand of 5, we're only going to be using a hand of 3, again to make things a little bit simpler. I ended up with an armor and 2 hits. You can also see my Cyber Leader gives me 2 fate points, which are stacked over there. Moving on to the Dalek force, we see that for his adventure cards, he got combat senses, additional sensory input, and reverse the polarity. Again, fairly nice, but nothing particularly game-breaking. He also got 2 hits and an armor for his battle cards, and 2 fate points for the Dalek patrol leader. Here we have the table all set up and ready to play. We're playing on a 3x3 board. We're using my quarry terrain, which as you can see I have started to add to make it more of a Skaro battlefield. The Cybermen are deployed on the left, the Daleks on the right. And you see all those yellow discs in no man's land? Those are Vortex Nodes. Those are what we're fighting over. They're little bits of time energy that we're going to be collecting. Each player gets 4 Vortex Nodes to set up on the board, and you get victory point for holding onto one of these at the end of the game. The weird thing about this scenario is that each player gets 4 Vortex Nodes to place for a total of 8, which seems like a typo to me. The Dalek force only has 7 models in the whole thing, so having 8 objective markers, it just feels like the board is swimming in objectives. If I do this again, I may well just give 2 Vortex Nodes to each player because it's not really hard collecting these things, and having a smaller number gives you an actual reason to go after them. In such a small game, there's not really a whole lot to say about the deployment. My Cyber Leader is placed near the center bottom. The Cybermats are mostly off to the flanks. My idea with them is that they're just going to go and grab Vortex Nodes and then go hide. The Daleks are sort of spread all around the deployment zone, with the Patrol Leader taking cover behind the rocks in the center bottom. With that, the game is ready to begin. So the first thing we do is we each grab 5 dice, we roll them, and whoever gets the most hit symbols gets the initiative for the round. My son won the initiative, so the Daleks go first, and they advance pretty straightforward across the board. A Dalek in the center grabs a Vortex Node, and the Patrol Leader is just a little bit cautious. He's going to send his underlings to do his bidding first. He's going to stay hidden behind that pile of rocks. For the Cybermen movement phase, we do much the same thing. We just advance towards the Daleks. We're slower. We're only 4 inches as opposed to the Daleks 6. 2 of the Cybermats on the right, though, do grab Vortex Nodes, so they've done something useful. No character on the board has a gun with range greater than 12 inches, so we can be pretty cavalier with our advance. Speaking of a bold advance, it's the Dalek shooting phase, and instead of shooting, they move out on all points. A Dalek on the center right grabs a Vortex Node, otherwise they just move in on the Cybermen, and especially note that they're really making a strong flanking presence. And the Cybermen in their shooting phase do much the same thing. They advance on all points. One Cybermat on the right grabs another Vortex Node, the other Cybermats go hide as per the plan. It's possible the Cybermen could have done some shooting, but they're not very good at it. The Daleks have lots of armor. We're much better at hand-to-hand fighting, so we're going to try and get right up in the face of these Daleks. So now it goes to the Dalek melee phase, and the Daleks only advance 2 inches to get into hand-to-hand combat. They don't want to do this, and they're out of range anyway, so nothing happens in that phase. In my phase, there's a little bit of opportunity on the center left. I've moved up my 2 Cybermat swarms and a Cybermat, and they all have the Hunter rule, which means that instead of making a 2-inch engagement move to get into hand-to-hand combat, they can go their normal move distance, which for these guys is 6 inches. So I wasn't really intending to do this. I kind of wanted my Cybermats just to be objective grabbers and to hold off a little bit to run interference for my Cybermen, but, you know, just ambushing a Dalek on its way forward sounded too fun to pass up, so I run 2 of my Cybermat swarms and a Cybermat into the Dalek on the center left. So, in a hand-to-hand with multiple opponents, the outnumbering player gets to choose a model to go first. I'm going to choose my lone Cybermat in this case. He has a hand-to-hand combat skill of 1 versus the Daleks 2. The Dalek will get an extra die for having an improvised close combat weapon, a plunger in this case, as will my Cybermat. The Cybermat also gets +1 die because he was the one to make the melee engagement move. So we end up with 3 dice versus 3 dice. As you would expect, we both get the same number of hits. It's a tie, and so we move on to the next character, which will be a Cybermat Swarm. Now, again, close combat skill of 1 plus improvised weapon plus charging plus being the second person to fight a character will give him a total of 4 dice. And the Cybermat Swarm also has the entangling rule, which means he takes away 1 of the Dalek's close combat dice. So this will be 4 dice to 2 dice. We roll that out, and the swarms do very badly. Both of us spend battle cards, we both spend 2 of our hit cards, and the Dalek ends up winning by 1. He makes a damage roll and ends up shocking the Cybermat Swarm, and bloodthirsty creatures that they are, the Dalek player uses a fate point to immediately exterminate the swarm. You may have noticed another change there that the FAQ has made. In the rule books and the way I played it in the solo scenario was that the person who scored the most hits, they take all of the hits and roll damage dice for each of those. In the FAQ, they change that. It is now the difference between the number of hits of the 2 close combat opponents. But we still have 1 more Cybermat Swarm to fight. Now it's 5 dice against 2. This time the Cybermat Swarm wins. The damage dice only come up with a shocked result. I feel these fate points are a little precious, so I don't spend 1, and so the Dalek is just shocked right now. With that, it is the end of round 1. We both draw battle cards to a full hand of 3. We all get armor cards, so each of us have battle card hands of all armors. The Dalek also recovers from being shocked, and of course at the end of the close combat, all the combatants are moved an inch away. We go into the next round, and the Daleks use the reverse polarity adventure card to automatically win the initiative. So the Daleks are going first, and the Cybermen have to weather a bunch of blaster fire. So in the Dalek movement phase, a lot of the Daleks stay still because their gun is a lot more powerful when they stay still. The left 2 Daleks continue to advance on that long flanking maneuver. The one on the right is actually a little bit worried. He's got 2 Cybermen bearing down on him, and so he thinks he was a little bit too aggressive to begin with. He's actually going to back up. Everyone else just stays where they are. The Cybermen in their movement phase continue to advance in the center on the right. I don't have any Cybermen around on the left to oppose those 2 Daleks, so I just kind of got to let them be. Again, I've got 3 Cybermats with Vortex Nodes just kind of hiding in my deployment zone. I'm a little worried those 2 left flanking Daleks are going to go on a Cybermat hunting expedition. And now here comes the painful part. It's the Dalek shooting phase. So he's going to start with the right-hand Dalek who's going to shoot that right-hand Cyberman out in the open. So this is the Dalek that moved, so his disruptor shot isn't as powerful as it could be, but it still causes a number of hits, but I use 2 of my armor battle cards to block it, so I just take the underfire token. Things do not go as well on the center left. That Dalek surrounded by Cybermats ignores the swarming creatures and just blasts a nearby Cyberman. There is no saving this guy, and he is exterminated. One of the flanking Daleks off on the left takes a shot in passing at the Cybermat surrounding the Dalek who just fired. He doesn't roll super well. Again, this Dalek is on the move, but I do have to use my last armor card to save that Cybermat, so he just takes an underfire token and is otherwise okay. A Dalek on the center right shocks a Cyberman who has been taking cover behind the rubble pile. And sure enough, the Dalek on the extreme left is going Cybermat hunting and uses his shooting phase to continue to advance on those guys running off with those Vortex Nodes. A Dalek in the center shocks one of my central Cybermen. And then the patrol leader opens fire on that same guy. Now, any hits that you cause on a shocked character are doubled, so he's rolling double damage dice and unsurprisingly exterminate him. So it is my shooting phase and I've taken a lot of damage. A bunch of my guys have under fire tokens and are lying down on the ground, some never to get up again. So I'm going to use an adventure card, Rapid Response, to clear all my under fire tokens. All my guys that are stuck, I want them to move forward and get up in the face of these Daleks. It actually doesn't end up clearing that many under fire tokens, but I feel like this is a critical round, so I want to keep moving. So I send a Cyberman to go help out the Cybermets against that one Dalek. Some of my guys are going to stay still. We're actually going to shoot a little bit because I want to gather my forces. Some of my guys have fallen down. I want to approach these guys in a big mob. And of course, the Cybermats with the Vortex Nodes continue to hide. They don't have any guns, so they might as well. The Cyberman on the right takes a shot at the Dalek on the right. I don't manage to do any damage, although my opponent may have used some of his armor cards to prevent the hits. So the Dalek takes an underfire token and that's it. My Cyber leader turns to the left and takes a long shot at this flanking Dalek. Even if I can put an underfire token, slow this guy down a little bit, that would be helpful. It's long range, shooting through cover. The Cyber leader is a little bit of a better shot, but I failed to hurt that Dalek. That's it for my shooting. Again, most of my guys have moved or are shocked at this point, so we go on to the hand-to-hand combat phase. But of course, since the Daleks have won the initiative, they get the first opportunity to attack, and the Dalek seizes the initiative and charges that lone Cybermat. This is a good move and something I didn't need to put myself in a position to take. Those Cybermats have that hunter skill, so they could have backed off 2 inches away and been safe from this kind of maneuver, but I didn't think about that. There's a lot of ins and outs about how this game works that I'm still learning. So anyway, the Dalek is actually rolling up with 4 dice, 2 hand-to-hand combat dice, 1 for the plunger and 1 for charging, while my poor Cybermat only has 2, 1 hand-to-hand combat skill and 1 for an improvised attack. The Dalek gets some hits through and manages to shock the Cybermat and again uses a fate point to exterminate it. You wouldn't think Daleks would be so good in hand-to-hand combat, but I did just see the evil of the Daleks for the first time recently, and it is really funny to watch them slap people around with that plunger of theirs, so I imagine that's what's going on here. But this Dalek's victory is going to be short-lived because now it's my melee phase, and the Cyberman Swarm and the Cybermen are going to charge into that guy. I'm going to start with the Cyberman Swarm. It doesn't manage to do any damage, but the Cyberman is made of much sterner stuff. He's got a melee skill of 5, plus 1 for charging, plus 1 for the melee 2 skill, plus 1 for being the second character to attack the same model, so that's going to bring him up to a total of 8 dice. He doesn't get the improvised weapon because he's actually got Cyberman shock gauntlets, which I don't want to use right now because if I use those, even though I get an extra 2 dice, I don't get to exterminate people, I can only shock them, and I would like to crack this Dalek open like an egg. Unsurprisingly, I win, but I do not get the exterminate symbol, and I just end up shocking the Dalek, but that is okay. I'm going to spend a fate point to jump up and down on this guy until he dies. So that is 1 Dalek down. And a victory point, because Cybermen get an extra victory point for exterminating someone in hand-to-hand combat. So that brings us to the end of round 2 and the recovery phase. The shocked Cyberman behind the scrap pile stands up. The 2 Daleks with underfire tokens keep those. They can't shake them off. Instead of drawing more battle cards, both players decide that they would rather recover one of their fate points. And since now we have an adventure card that was used, we get to see if we can recover that as well. So both players roll a die on a lightning symbol. They get to draw the top discarded adventure card back into their hand. Neither of us managed to do that, however, and we are on to round 3. Round 3 of 6, by the way, if you're curious. So the Daleks win the initiative again, and they're trying to be a little bit sneaky. The left-hand Dalek continues to advance on the Cybermats. The central Dalek goes and very boldly runs into the midst of my Cybermen in the center of the table. So that's got my Cyberman and my Cyber leader right there. What he's trying to do is just screen the patrol leader. He really doesn't want to lose that guy. The Dalek on the center right tries to advance around the scrap pile to surprise the Cybermen, moving towards that far right-hand side Cyberman. The rest of them stay still, and we move on to the Cyberman phase. The big news is that the Cybermats have had enough of getting chased around by this Dalek. They are going to go try and eat him. They rush out from their hiding places and move up on the advancing Dalek. The Cybermat Swarm on the left has grabbed the Vortex Node that the Dalek dropped when we kicked him to death. His buddy goes chasing after the far left-hand Dalek. The Central Cyberman and the Cyber Leader move up to attack the Dalek advancing on them. And the two right-hand Cybermen were not fooled by the sneaky maneuver of the Dalek on the right, and they move around the other side of the scrap pile to catch him. In the Dalek shooting phase, the flanking right-hand Dalek goes and makes a surprise shot against one of those Cybermen who have doubled back to attack him. He does get a hit through, but I use an armor card to defend myself. The Cybermat hunting Dalek on the left takes a shot at the lead Cybermat coming after him. Now, he has an under fire token, and normally you wouldn't be able to shoot when you have one under fire token, but the Daleks all have a special rule called override, which means that they can still take a shot, but they will only hit on lightning bolt exterminate symbols instead of the to hit symbols. Nonetheless, this plucky Dalek does pretty well. He's gone across the table hunting down these guys. He's not going to be stopped now, and he manages to exterminate the lead Cybermat. The Dalek on the extreme right is under a similar situation. He's throwing a whole bunch of dice at that one Cyberman undercover. If a Dalek doesn't move, they're throwing 8 dice for that Dalek disruptor of theirs. It is -1 because of range and another -1 because of the intervening terrain. That's still 6 dice, but he does have that under fire token, which means that he only hits on lightning bolts and he doesn't manage any of them. So that Cyberman is just fine. And that other Dalek is looking like he's in a lot of trouble. The Daleks continue to have problems in the center. The central Dalek that moved up to intercept those Cybermen and the patrol leader only managed to shock that central Cyberman. I believe this was the point where my opponent got 2 hits through and so rolled 2 damage dice and ended up with 2 armor, which meant that there was no damage whatsoever. So we used a fate point to re-roll that and rolled 2 armor again. So the first shot didn't do anything. Patrol leader then fired. Would have had a massive number of dice, but still only managed to shock him. In better news for the Sons of Skaro, the Dalek on the left goes and just blasts the Cybermen coming after him into oblivion. Those little trees, not enough to save him. So now it's the Cybermen shooting phase. The 2 surviving Cybermats go and surround the hunting Dalek, but this time they're smart about it and they know to stay more than 2 inches away. The Cybermat swarm over on the center left that grabbed that Vortex Node. He now doubles over to the right to help out the Cyber Leader who's about to attack that Dalek. The Cyber Leader is already within melee range of that central Dalek, so he opens up with his Cyber Gun, but that Dalekium armor is too strong and he doesn't cause any damage. However, the right-hand Cyberman by the scrap pile does real well. He opens up with his Cyber Gun and manages to shock the approaching Dalek over there. It's now the hand-to-hand combat phase, and the Dalek player uses the adventure card Combat Senses, which is going to give him an extra die for all of his attacks. In the center, that brave Dalek continues to be a boss. He's going to fly straight into the Cyberman leader. He is unlikely to win this, but he's looking in a lot of trouble either way, so might as well try and get the advantage while he can, or at least less of a disadvantage. In the event, neither of us cause any damage to each other, and we're just pushed apart 1 inch. The Cybermats do much better. They team up and destroy the Dalek that had been hunting them the whole game. They lost 1 of their number in the shooting phase, but they got revenge in the melee phase. It's not looking good for the Daleks over on the right either. As you remember, that guy was shocked earlier, so the 2 Cybermen just walk into him and automatically kick him to death. Just crack him open and step on the little Khaled mutant they find inside. And finally, the Cyber Leader and the Cybermat Swarm get a chance to strike back at the central Dalek, and sure enough, he is destroyed as well. That was a brutal round for both sides, and we're moving on to round 4. Before we do, the recovery phase, the central Cyberman not only stands up from being shocked, but also recovers 1 of his under fire tokens. None of the other models shake their under fire. Both players decide to grab more fate instead of drawing more battle cards. And neither of us are able to claim a discarded adventure card. Round 4 and the Cybermen win the initiative. The Cybermats that just ate the hunting Dalek go on to his friend to do the same. The center has been claimed for the Cybermen, so now the Cybermat Swarm, the Cyberman who recovered from being shocked, and the Cyber Leader all start chasing the Dalek Patrol Leader. The Cyberman on the right also starts chasing after that Dalek on the right, and I'm not sure what's up with his friend. I don't know why I didn't move him. There's only 3 Daleks left on the table right now. Both the patrol leader and the Dalek on the right do not like this charging mass of Cybermen coming at them, so they both back up. The Dalek on the far left isn't so scared of those Cybermats and digs in and prepares to fire. It's the Cybermen shooting phase now, and everyone forgoes the Cybergun to close in for the kill. In the Dalek shooting phase, the left-hand Dalek firing at full blast exterminates one of the Cybermats. The right-hand Dalek manages to shock the approaching Cyberman on the right, even though he's taking cover behind the barbed wire. And the patrol leader obliterates a swarm, so pretty effective Dalek shooting phase. We now only have the Cyber leader, 3 Cybermen, and 1 Cybermat left. In the melee phase, the only combat to take place is the lone Cybermat attacking the Dalek. Neither of us managed to cause any damage to each other. In the recovery phase, everyone keeps their under fire tokens. I draw some more battle cards. The Daleks choose to get a fate point back. The Daleks also roll the lightning bolt and manage to get the adventure card combat senses back in their hand. We're on to round 5 and the Daleks win the initiative. Uh-oh, and they all just stay exactly where they are. It's do or die for the Dalek gunsticks. The Cybermen do the opposite and come charging out from all directions. But now it's the Dalek shooting phase, and the left-hand Dalek exterminates the last of the Cybermats. That guy is under no pressure, and the left-hand side of the board is cleared of Cybermen. Not to be outdone, the right-hand Dalek disintegrates an approaching Cyberman with a full blast shot. Seeing such acts of heroism on the flanks, the patrol leader decides that that's what underlings are for. They need to dig in and start blasting. He is too valuable to be lost in this conflict, and so he uses his shooting phase to just retreat away from the approaching Cybermen in the center. And since he retreats 6 inches and the Cybermen only move 4, plus a 2-inch advancement in melee if they can make it, they are not going to catch him in hand-to-hand combat this round. Frustrated, the Cyber leader and the Cybermen spend their shooting phase blasting the patrol leader, trying to keep him in place. We do pretty well. We put 2 under fire tokens on the patrol leader and shock him, but he is still alive. In the recovery phase, we both recover a fate point. The patrol leader manages to drop one of his under fire tokens, as does the far right-hand Cyberman. On to round 6, and it's looking a little rough for the Cybermen. We've got 2 Cybermen and the Cyber leader against 2 Daleks and the patrol leader. Those are not good odds, but we're going to see what we can do. I do win the initiative and advance on my remaining enemies. The right-hand Dalek stays where he is, the patrol leader continues to retreat, and the left-hand Dalek comes running to help his commander. The right-hand Cyberman decides that he's really got no choice but to try to get into hand-to-hand combat with that Dalek. Hope that full blast shot doesn't cripple me too much. The Cyber leader and the Cyberman continue to chase the patrol leader. I didn't realize at the time that this was the last round of the game. I should have just shot him, but he's running out of board. I'm hoping to chase him down. In the Dalek shooting phase, the right-hand Dalek manages to shock the approaching Cyberman. He breathes a big sigh of relief. And the patrol leader does what patrol leaders do and exterminates the advancing normal Cyberman. The last Dalek continues his jog to where the action is. However, the Cybermen aren't out yet. I've got a trick to play. I still have a fate point, so I'm going to spend that to recover the shocked Cyberman over on the right, which now means that he can jump into hand-to-hand combat against the surprised Dalek who thought that he blasted a big hole in him. It's 5 close combat dice, plus 1 for charging, plus 1 for his melee 2 skill, minus 1 for having an under fire token, 6 dice to 3. The Cyberman dropkicks the Dalek, manages to exterminate him, helping to even things up at the end of the game. I mean, it's not quite even, the Daleks almost certainly have won, but just to be sure and for a sense of finality, we keep playing. We're going to do another turn real quick. The Daleks win the initiative, and the normal Dalek continues to advance over on the left. I've got a Cyberman and my Cyber leader. Cyber leader advances on that new Dalek, as does the guy all the way on the right, but that is a long hike for that guy. The patrol leader blasts my Cyber leader, but I've been holding on to the infinite armor battle card, so that means I get to negate all the hits from a shooting attack that I take in a round. I've been hanging on to that for a while in order to protect my Cyber leader, and I gotta use it now. But there is one more Dalek there. He gets his normal 4 dice shot into my Cyber leader and manages to shock me. And of course, that's bad news because I had moved up in melee range, which means that now, in the melee phase, the Dalek can advance its 2 inches and automatically exterminate me. And with that extra round out of the way, we can safely call it. We've got the patrol leader and a normal Dalek left against just one regular Cyberman. It's not looking good for him, so he just legs it back to cyberbase. So, Daleks win this meeting of metal. Scenario 1 is done. Not bad. Interesting game. Obviously, I'm not here to absolutely crush my 8-year-old son. That's not what I was interested in doing. And of course, he's 8, so there's definitely things on both sides that we could have done more efficiently, more cleverly. This is an interesting game. On the one hand, it's fairly simple, there's not a whole lot of mechanics to it. A younger player can definitely play this game. On the other hand, the interaction of under fire tokens, battle cards, adventure cards, fate tokens, I think there's a lot of room for a very clever player, a very tactical player, to surprise someone. It's going to be hard to catch someone, to corner them. As you saw at the end of the game, there was that Cyberman who we thought was down and out, but he suddenly sprang up and beat up a Dalek in hand-to-hand combat. I think there's a lot of opportunities for things like that, for taking an area of the battlefield that your opponent feels comfortable with, and with either an adventure card or a fate token, suddenly turning it around and making it a lot more dangerous. So while I think this is something that you can play out at surface level and you can play against younger players, if you wanted to get really competitive with this, I think you can be rewarded by doing so. I think I like the system. I enjoyed this game, and granted I'm a big Doctor Who fan. But I'm a fan of a lot of things, and not all miniature games strike me in quite the same way. So I think I'm going to keep going with this, even if Warlord Games is probably going to eventually shut this down. I think I like the changes to the shock rule. I think it makes a lot more sense. It's not like the rules as written in the rulebook are unplayable, but this just feels a little more natural. I don't have a lot of faith that the forces are very well balanced, but this didn't feel bad. The Cybermen were clearly going to win most of the hand-to-hand combats that they got into that didn't involve Cybermats, but the Daleks shoot really hard, and those underfire tokens are a pain for both sides. If the Cybermen can't advance, they're not doing much, and if the Daleks are reduced to just those lightning bolts for shooting, they are also in a much worse position. And those underfire tokens stick with you. They can be this ongoing problem for a character, but they can also just suddenly disappear with the right adventure card or a fate token. I do think that the Cybermen probably need those Cybermats. That speed was really handy in the game. I am going to keep going with this game. I painted up some more terrain. I painted a special weapons Dalek. I'm very excited about all this. Hopefully you enjoyed it as well. Leave a comment below if you have any questions, observations, concerns, and I will see you on the next one.